Good afternoon, this is David Wendell with BushcraftOnFire, and we're going to take a break from our Almost Naked Into the Bush series today to show you the bow drill method, but I want to show you a couple of neat little tricks that you can do to make it easier with you for a bow drill. There's basic components of a bow drill, and the first of course is your bow. This is a bow that I took out of the woods in Alabama back in the mid-1990s. This is a piece of cherry wood, and it's lasted me all this time. Again, natives wouldn't throw away their tools and make a new one every time, so I keep my tools. I've got on here 550 paracord. If you can get a view of that paracord, that's kind of worn. This paracord has literally made hundreds and hundreds, maybe even thousands of fires. But what I do is I simply have a Y notch at the top of the drill, and I throw a slip knot over here, and then I come down the drill and I actually bored a hole that I put my cordage through. One of the mistakes that people do a lot when they're making a bow drill is they string this drill real tight. It doesn't have to be real tight. It's got to fit around the spindle, and I'm going to show you how to tighten it up once that it's on the spindle. But what you do is just simply wrap your cord. The first time I go over top, the second time I come underneath, then I go over top again, underneath, and then I just finish off with a few half hitches. You'll notice that this cord is longer than I need. This cord will literally, if I just slide it up a little bit and replace that worn out part, this will last me another 400 or 500 fires, so it's plenty on there for me to use. So I just throw some half hitches over there, keep it in place until I have it where I need it. That's the bow, and again, not very hard. It's a pretty simple little technique. This is a fireboard, and I believe that this is a piece of sycamore. We've used this to start a lot of fires, and you can see already there's a lot of holes drilled in here. One of the mistakes that I made was I tried to use an old notch today, and it burned out my spindle. Now we're going to get back to the fireboard in a minute, but the spindle is real important. This is a piece of mule fat, and a friend of mine, Bill Quarles, gave me this mule fat. It comes from the deserts out in California, Arizona area. And as I put that in the wrong notch, you can see it got a little nip on there. So what I need to do is I need to carve that off. Now, when you're making your spindle, you want the top end to be very sharp, almost pointed. That gives you as little friction as possible on that top end. The bottom end, on the other hand, you want to be you want to have a point in the middle, but you want it to be blunt. When I first started to learn the bow drill, I made a huge mistake. I looked in a book, and I thought that both ends were pointed, and I became an expert at drilling, but I wasn't very good at the bow drill. So what you need to do is make that kind of blunt. So that's your spindle, pointed at one end, blunt at the other. Now I want to show you a trick to use with your spindle. This is my everyday carry knife. I carry this knife with me everywhere I go. It's a Schrade old timer, but what I've done is I've taken this knife, this is a rubberized handle, and on the back of the knife I've actually scored out a spot. And in that spot I've taken a half a teaspoon from a metal measuring spoon, and I've bored out all the way down to the tang. This is a full tang knife. I've bored out all the way to that tang, and I put JB weld in there and put that spoon in to hold that in place. You can see some of the JB weld around the edge. This is a trick that a friend of mine, Bill Quarles, also showed me, and it works real well. What I do is essentially I have my handhold with me anytime I go. I just put my knife in the sheath, and I wouldn't recommend that you try it without the sheath. I recommend that you put it in the sheath and wrap the cordage back inside here so it stays out of my way. And then I can simply take my knife, put on top of this drill, and I have a handhold with me all the time. So it's very, very easy, a very good trick. If you have a knife that you don't care if you mess up the handle, I highly recommend you do this, because the handhold is the hardest piece to find in the bush. You can always use a piece of wood. I have some antlers and some bones that I've used that work pretty well, but this is absolutely no friction whatsoever, and it just really turns that drill, and you'll see. So the next thing that we need to do is to prepare our fireboard, to prepare our notch in here. And this is the all-important part of the whole setup. What I'll do is simply take a place where I've not been and drill a hole with my knife. Now, one of the reasons why I do the hand drill, if I can, when I'm in a primitive situation, is because I don't have these tools. I don't have my knife, I don't have cordage, I don't have a handhold that's pre-made, so it's a little bit harder. If I was out in just an everyday situation, I would use this setup right here because it's easy, it's fast. I can light a fire with this almost as fast as many people can light a fire with a lighter. I wrap my spindle inside of the bow so that the spindle is on the outside of the string. And again, you can see this is not very tight. I see a lot of people wrap this real tight. This spindle may fly out of there and hit somebody in front of you or stop you from being able to spin it very fast. You don't really need it that tight, and there's a little technique I'll show you in a minute as to why you don't. Put it right in my hole. And then I'm going to just turn it a few times to get it seated in there. Now again, we're not trying to make a fire right now, but you can see all the smoke comes out of here. This is a good setup. I may have been wrong on this. This may not be sycamore, this may be alder. But either way, it's going to work fine. Now let me show you another little trick while we're here. We've got our hole burned in. A lot of people cut a notch, they cut like this. What I do when I cut a notch is I cut right to the center of my hole. You can see the center there. And I go in about a quarter way into my hole. Now again, you can see this is a lot easier when you do it with a knife than if you do it with a, and I'm just using the saw on my Swiss Army. Now when I make the other cut, I'm going to cut out again into the center with the triangle. I hope you can see that triangle there. What that does is allow that powder to fall out, but it gives it a broad base on the bottom instead of a straight notch. It gives a broad base where that dust can fire up underneath of there. And that dust will get nice and hot in there very quickly. And again, that's a little trick that'll save you some time as you're drilling this hole and as you're making your fire. It'll probably stop you from going 30 to 40 spins down to 5 or 6 spins. So what we're going to do is we're ready to fire this up.